Thank you. Yes, so I'm very excited about Sarah's and Jeff's work today, which I know has been actually not just a project, but really a long-term relationship. And just a quick advertisement for the events coming up. There is a joint webinar next week with the Civic Switchboard folks at University of Pittsburgh. I'm hoping that people come and bring their favorite or soon-to-be favorite librarian from either the university or the public library. Asha will be presenting from Charlotte, and then we'll be hearing from the Civic Switchboard folks from Las Vegas, which will be an interesting partnership between the university library and the city open data folks. We shifted office hours because of July 4th to a little later, so those are all available. Cole has the idea showcase all lined up for July. I think Charlotte, Kate from Hartford, I forget the third one, but it's a good lineup. Gabby will be doing an intro to NNIP for any new staff who are people who have joined in the last few months or maybe just never got involved with NNIP. This will be a good way for them to get to know us. And I'm in the midst of organizing sort of a birds of a feather sharing about food access and insecurity. I've been seeing a lot of folks from around the network post things on food access and insecurity. So this is just a way to sort of surface different work and interests um, uh, all together informally. So I will stop sharing and pass it over to Jeff. Do you want to start?
Sure. Thanks, Kathy. We start sharing my screen here.
Should have permissions. I guess we should have tested that before.
Yep. Nope. Looks like it worked.
Excellent.
Okay. You see the slide, opening slide?
Yeah, it's lovely to see all those collaborations.
Yeah. So the title of the session is Leveraging Data and Partnerships to Increase Voting. And for this project, oops, it's auto advancing. I need to stop that. Or maybe I should let it go and try to get through this quicker. So too many partners to name, but I'll talk about a number of them throughout the presentation. So just to introduce myself again, I'm Jeff Matson from the Center for Urban and Regional Affairs, one of two CURAs in NNIP. And we're an all-university applied research center that works across faculty, staff, and students from all campuses, all colleges, all centers, and all departments. And we partner with state and local governments, neighborhoods, and nonprofits statewide. My specific program within CURA is one of our technical assistance centers called CGIS. We do technical assistance largely for the nonprofit community, mapping and data analysis, and we are the local partner in NNIP, the National Neighborhood Indicators Partnership. So this project that I'm going to talk about today actually came out of another organization kind of closely related, the Minnesota Census Mobilization Partnership, which is a program of the Minnesota Council on Foundations, which was one of those previously listed partners. And they do a lot of work with complete count census committees and ensuring accurate census data. And they 2 years ago decided to turn their attention to elections, very also important work in conversations about democratizing data and access to information. And so, again, enlisted a number of partners to start looking at issues around elections and voter turnout. And the big voter engagement questions are kind of fit along with the big questions that GIS and geography lend themselves to answering, which are what does the population in a given location look like, and do they vote? Oops, sorry about that. And where does a given population of non-voters live? So we can kind of use this data and website to answer both of these questions. So what we did 2 years ago, and I'll talk about updates kind of near the end of the presentation, is we took precinct level data from the 2022 statewide election, and then we kind of married that with 2020 census demographic and housing characteristics. So specifically table P10, which is race for the population 18 and over, which we use as a surrogate for the eligible voting population. So we aggregate those census blocks up to our voting precincts, and we end up with a table of precinct level data that contains both demographic information as well as the number of voters or votes cast, and we can use that to calculate turnout. So we take this precinct level turnout data and we use that to create a number of different map layers in an ArcGIS Online web app where people can examine, again, down to the voter precinct, both the turnout, the number of votes cast, as well as the demographics and some other characteristics of those precincts. So we have layers on race and ethnicity by precinct. We have some other demographic data, but kind of the hallmark data set in this application is these layers that we're calling bivariate race maps. So these show a combination of turnout as well as race for all of the race ethnicity categories in the census, as well as a combined BIPOC category. So that groups doing get out the vote campaigns or outreach can target specific populations that they work with and find areas that are both high in those certain demographics and also low in voter turnout. So in this case, areas on the map in the brightest yellow indicate low voter turnout, but high percentages of BIPOC population. We have some additional layers that are oftentimes associated with low voter turnout. In this case, we have renter households, which is another population correlated with low turnout, as well as younger populations. So the percentage of persons 18 to 24. And then another population of interest are seniors. So those that, while they may vote in high numbers, they oftentimes need assistance in getting to polls. And so other groups that are working with seniors and helping them vote can also locate areas of interest. I mentioned we do have these for all race categories. This is, again, just showing a precinct that has a high voter turnout and also kind of a higher, at least higher than average Latino population. We also included some county level averages. So again, you can get a sense of whether, your larger area is voting at a higher or lower rate than other counties around the state. And finally, some features from this application that allow you to kind of fine tune the data you're looking at. In this case, we have the ability to filter either by county or city. So the map will only show those areas, as well as some functions that let you export the data. So if you really want to look at the spreadsheets kind of behind the maps, you can get access to the raw data right through the application. So we're not going to demo the application here, but more kind of talk about what we did once we created the application. But first of all, a few limitations. While it does show turnout and it does show race, it does not show turnout by race. It also does not subtract those who are not eligible to vote. So mainly non-US citizens over the age of 18. And when we look at these bivariate race maps that show high and low ranges of population, they're really relative. An area that has a high Latino population, maybe 60% Latino, but an area that is considered a high Native American population may only be 5% Native American. But compared to all of our census tracts, that's considered high. And then, of course, 2022 was a non-presidential election. So turnout is always lower in these midterm years. But kind of the most exciting thing about this project was the fact that one of our community partners kind of led the way in doing the organizing and the outreach and the training in the use of this map. So Voices for Racial Justice created their own version of the map, a little more politicized than our version that's sitting on the university website. which we're required to kind of be nonpartisan, non-political. But they really saw this as a way to kind of build power by calling out areas, that traditionally had either been underserved and underrepresented, both in terms of elections and in voter turnout and political representation. So they led trainings with a number of different groups, a lot of them targeting specific populations, the local NAACP, the Coalition of Asian American Leaders, ACER, which works with our West African immigrant community, and again, really led the way and trained literally hundreds of different community activists and users in the use of this map. We were also fortunate enough to have a link to our voter turnout demographic mapping website from our Secretary of State's office, which probably in and of itself caused this website and map to be the most visited page on our website for an entire year, other than our homepage. So that was great to get that kind of plug right from the Secretary of State's office. And they were one of the partners in our work. They're the ones that provided the precinct level data on number of votes cast. So what are we doing next with this? Well, we said we were going to update it after 2024, and that's actually what we're working on this summer. So we are working on looking at the 2024 election results, and we're also creating a series of maps showing the margin of victory. So if you are working or living in a district that had a very close race, whether it be a local state Senate or legislative district or presidential vote cast, and you want to target those areas to try to flip that precinct one way or another, you're able to spot those areas in our data. But what are we doing for 2026? Well, we're going to use kind of a different base data set this time. We're going to use the Census Bureau's special tabulation of citizen voting age population by race and ethnicity. This is U.S. citizens 18 years and over by race, and it goes down to the block group level data. Unfortunately, block groups do not fit nicely into precincts. So what we're going to do is we're going to use Esri's data apportionment tools, which uses kind of a weighted block population to fit data from one geography into another. And we're going to run some kind of statistical tests to judge the accuracy of it before we deem it better than the block group level data or block level data from 2020. So we're kind of going for more recency and more accuracy in terms of those actually eligible to vote versus, a geography that can easily fit into our voter districts. So we'll see kind of how that turns out. But we are very fortunate to have kind of a strong, foundation of organizations that support get out the vote and voting rights efforts. The Minnesota Council on Foundations, which is kind of funding a portion of this work, has actually established something that they're calling the Minnesota Civic Resilience Fund to build voter capacity, promote high turnout, and defend the right to vote. And this is going to end up being $300,000 in grants given out to 12 different nonprofits that are engaged in these efforts. And that's kind of an ongoing application. So again, really fortunate to have kind of strong support in this arena. And don't forget to vote. Here's the website to our old application, which is still up and running and coming soon. It has to be done by the end of July because I'm giving a training to the League of Women Voters in Minnesota on August 4th. So we've got a definite deadline to get Vote 2026 up and running. And that's what I've got. Thank you. Oh, you muted, Kathy.
Oh, great. Thank you. Up,
Okay,
and you have yours all ready, Sarah. Go ahead.
I have mine ready. All right. Well, thank you for this opportunity, and it's really interesting to hear what other folks are doing. Obviously, getting ideas for what we can think about doing here in Connecticut. So a little bit of background on this. We work through a coalition of organizations called the Hartford Votes Coalition, and their mission statement, which they actually have been revamping over the past year or so. But they're an organization that is committed to growing a culture of civic participation. So not just voting; it was just voting, but now they're actually expanding more widely to civic participation with the belief that voting is actually an outcome of civic participation. So they're shifting their focus just a little bit. These are some of the organizations that are part of the work that we've been doing really since 2020. Some really grassroots organizations, Hartford Next, that works in all of the neighborhoods, Hartford Health Initiative, as well as some of the higher level institutions in the city, the YWCA of Greater Hartford, Trinity College, Political Science Department, and the Hartford Public Library, of course. They're a great partner in this as well. So just a little bit of context. This chart might look similar to a line chart in most of our cities, but presidential election turnout has been kind of slowly going down, while in Connecticut it's been remaining about the same. Midterm voter turnout has been decreasing, and municipal election has really it's actually been increasing slightly in the state, and really up and down in the city of Hartford. So some of the things I guess what I'm gonna say is we're doing a bit of a smorgasbord of interventions, I guess, to support the Hartford Votes Coalition in their work. I attend they do monthly meetings, they do in-person quarterly meetings. So someone from CT Data is at most of these, and we're listening kind of the whole time of what are people needing, what kind of questions are they asking, and what kind of supports might we be able to provide. Kind of a regular analysis we've been doing is after elections. So this is the using just the Secretary of State's Secretary of State's portal with the total turnout from the towns, just kind of doing a scan as soon as we can after the elections. How has turnout changed over time across the state? There was some discussion in the 2024 elections how a town went from voting from Biden to Trump. Kind of those, we had a bunch of flipping towns. We have a lot of really kind of purple towns, what we'd call purple towns. So we wanted to be able to explore a little bit after the election, just some high level analysis. But really what we do try to do in Hartford is more neighborhood-based analysis, kind of more deeper analysis using the Secretary of State's voter file. What this chart is showing is that the last municipal election in 2023, we wanted to see what is the voting behavior in the neighborhoods during mayoral elections, trying to look at what's the most similar comparable election that might help get out the vote groups identify what their strategy should be related to turning out the vote for the mayoral election. So we created this chart as one of our data stories. All of these are up on our website at ctdata.org/vote. All of this information is there. We did a data walk with the Get Out the Vote groups, both to help them learn how to use these charts, some graphical literacy. Some of what they shared with us informed, as a data walk does, informed the analysis that we compiled and gave us some notes that we added to charts. North Meadows, I think that is a place where there's actually not a lot of residential. It's not a residential neighborhood really. So some things like that that we point out. And then based on that data walk, actually, one of the challenging things about working with people who aren't like data nerds is like, I struggle at least with what do people need to know that we can answer with data? And you can't just ask that question, like, what do you need to know that can be informed with data? Because some of the answers we get are, we need to know like who listens to what radio station, where do people live, who listen to the different radio stations. And obviously that's not a public data set. And so we just kind of have to be attentive, listening to what people are saying and kind of figuring out, like, is this public data set going to help inform this question that people are asking? And so people did want to know things like language spoken at home. That's a really important question in Hartford, where almost 50% of households speak a language other than English at home. And so we created a neighborhood dashboard based on input we got through that data walk. And we have heard from folks in the group that they do use this information when they're like applying for a grant to the one of our local community foundations. They look at this information in order to determine what neighborhood do we want to focus on, what languages do we want to translate our materials into. Another thing, again, like as we've grown to working with them, we just kind of observe, and they have been a group of organizations working side by side. And one of the things that I've been trying to help them do is think about, okay, but like you're all working toward the same end. We're seeing a decrease in voter turnout. How do we kind of look at the whole and not duplicate efforts and be strategic about where we are focusing? So one of the things that I have done and that we're still trying to figure out how to help them work with is, how do they compile information that can help them document the work that they're doing and be able to see, what are we doing as one organization? Where are we focusing? What neighborhoods are we focusing? How many people are turning out to these different events? There's more fields on this spreadsheet, but then being able to look at it as a whole and see, as a coalition, we're focusing on these 3 neighborhoods. Is that going to be our strategy, or do we want to strategically decide to focus on the whole city? So being able to kind of compile information so they actually know what's the baseline that we're working from, and how do we make sure that we're strategically focusing where we decide to focus based on where we think there's the greatest opportunity to increase turnout or something like that. And then finally, oh, sorry, this header is incorrect. This is really where it started, is really looking at what are the potential number of not yet registered voters in, by census block. We created this tool in a way so people could see the streets. And we've had partners say, okay, this like dark blue section of Asylum Hill, I'm going to zoom in to see what those streets are, and we're going to focus our door knocking on this census block today. And this is using the citizen voting age population, CVAP. And actually I didn't know it was, there's a race and ethnicity version, so we'll be looking at that. But this was people, again, really wanting to, like, they're going to be on the ground, walking around in the neighborhood. Like, what's the most important place for me to be trying to register voters? So that was the kind of the question that this was born out of. And then really quickly, just the last thing, because we're really in the midst of this now, is because of the engagement we have done with them, we actually did develop a research project. The goal is to provide information for these Get Out the Vote organizations to understand why people do and don't vote in their own words in Hartford, so that these groups can improve their strategies. And really what they want to be able to do is for individual organizations to make decisions, to strategize collaboratively across the city, and then to engage in advocacy priorities, because obviously we know there's only so much that these nonprofits can do. There are structural factors that are beyond their control, and they don't have the information they need to really decide of all of the possible strategies that are really important. Like, what's the advocacy we're going to engage in when there's so much to choose from? And so really the research questions, what structural barriers get in the way of eligible voters from voting? What does voting look like? How has it changed over time? And why do and don't people vote in Hartford? So I'll stop there. That's a lot of information and a big smorgasbord, but happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Sarah. Do folks have questions? before I jump in?
Hi, I'm just curious. I like your research questions and so in terms of trying to figure out your barriers for people in getting out to vote, are you just doing surveys or you working with these kind of community groups? How are you trying to answer that question?
We did focus groups for this. We're hoping to do two phases of the research. This first one was focus groups. We worked with these community partners to organize with their constituents, recruit people into focus groups. And so that was where we gleaned that information. We're hoping to do more, like some surveys, but right now they're working on integrating what we've learned into their 2026 strategies.
And is that going to be something that you'll publish the results on, or is it just being used at the local level?
We will publish the results with the caveat that people they really emphasized that they didn't want a normal report. They wanted something that would be really useful. So it does not look like a typical qualitative research report. And yeah, so yes, but we will be publishing that.
Thank you.
I guess for both Sarah and Jeff, maybe I missed this at the beginning, but how did they find you? Did this just because people know who you are and they called you up on the help desk line, or you met them at another community meeting, or somebody referred you? Just how, like, thinking about how partners would start these relationships.
Yeah, I think for us, a lot of it was just kind of either the reputation or the fact that they'd worked with us before. They knew they had a data question and kind of needed a data solution and a mapping solution, and just kind of know of us as the local go-to. There was we're in a little bit of a competition with another organization that provides the same kind of support, but they charge for their time, which we don't. And so oftentimes, you have to work under our timeline and with our students, but at least you get the project done at no cost. Where if you use one of these other organizations like Wilder Research or Minnesota Compass, you're going to have to pay for what they produce for you. So.
A luxury.
We actually had the idea, we wanted to work with the voter file for a while, and we applied for a small grant to be able to develop that for the city. And so I had known of the Hartford Votes Coalition. They've been around for a long time, and so just reached out to them and asked if people would want to do kind of user stories kind of things to figure out what it was that people needed. And then I just stayed connected with them and just kept on going to the meetings. So
I have a question. I'm curious, both Jeff and Sarah, how effective was sharing the data in increasing voter turnout during the next election cycle?
Yeah, that's the hardest thing to figure out, and we're not we're not exactly sure that we can do that at this point. In the last go around, I think it was kind of a scramble to get all the data together and get it out there and get it shared with everyone, where we didn't probably have enough time or enough resources to kind of look into that question. But we're hoping to do a better job this time of actually tracking, okay, what areas did people really focus on? Where did they concentrate, their efforts? We can certainly see, much like Sarah's website showed, where turnout changed over time. But again, whether that correlates with any outreach efforts, that we haven't been able to determine yet.
Yeah, agreed. Because voting decreased, of course, across the city. But that is where we are working on trying to figure out, is there some way we can create a data sharing agreement with organizations so that when they do register, I didn't show a spreadsheet of voter registration, We do have partners who do actually collect the names, date of birth, so they do check on whether the people they look at, like how many of the people we registered, one actually registered, because you have to mail the form. Like you can fill out the form, but it doesn't mean, obviously not every form makes it to the Secretary of State's office. So we are working on trying to figure out, is there a way we can do data sharing? The coalition is working on becoming a true collective impact organization, a group where there will be like an MOU they have to sign that they will do data sharing, and then it will include like a data sharing agreement where we would define how we ethically take the data, what we do with it and stuff like that. Because we don't know, like the turnout has been decreasing, but has it been increasing among the people that the coalition has been engaging? We do know for one of our partners it has, but it's because he's a political science researcher and he's doing an experiment like with voter captains, it's called relational organizing. So we know his is increasing, helping to increase on a really small scale, but we don't know that about any of the other work.
I have another question, if no. Okay. What barriers did you guys experience? I guess you and then maybe the organizations that were collecting the data.
I mean, I could go first. One of the barriers is really a lot of these organizations are really small. They don't have dedicated staffing. They have a small amount of funding that maybe they have for Get Out the Vote work. They don't have like the data capacity is not there, data literacy. So feel like these spreadsheets we haven't been able to figure out how to have people use them yet. And I think a lot of it comes down to time, even though they help to kind of create them. Like I talked to them and they told me what they needed and I built what I thought, could be helpful, but it's the time that it takes to actually collect that information. They're just very shoestring. A lot of them are very shoestring budget. So that is one of the first thing that pops in my mind, because that also relates to the work that they can do to get out the vote, even itself. Like it's not they, have a ton of time they're spending there. Is that this work is not very well funded across the board, and they have maybe $20,000 to do voter engagement for an entire, for the entire year. And so Connecticut is not people don't care about Connecticut, I will say, when it comes to voting. We're a blue state, in spite of like all, it's supposed to be nonpartisan. We're a blue state. So we don't get a lot of funding coming into Connecticut, to be honest. So these folks are trying to do what they can do with a very little funding.
I would agree. I would say it's largely a lot of the same issues around data literacy and capacity. A lot of people will come to our trainings, but do they actually then go and attempt to, use this themselves and use it in very kind of intentional and specific examples, I think and it's hard to follow up. We don't have the capacity to then go back to all of them and make sure they're using it and see if they have questions or see if they need additional training. So we kind of sometimes have to just, throw it out there and hope that it sticks with as many people as we can.
I'm curious, is there any overlap between the census outreach coalitions and the Get Out the Vote? Are those the same groups, or?
Yeah, in our case, it's just largely all the same people that are involved. A lot of times if you're interested in one, you're interested in the other, and just, the timing of census outreach is such that you can do, election outreach in between a lot of the times. So that works out, but yeah, a lot of overlap.
And I will say, I'm hoping to introduce, because this group is expanding to civic engagement, that is something that they will be open to. Yes, partnering with us on that as well.
Just around the corner with its own challenges.
That would be a good topic for another discussion. What are NNIP partners doing around census, actually? But
yeah, we should gather what we know from last time because we have some things written up already, but it's obviously a completely different context. So even more challenging. We thought we were challenged before, and now it's even more challenging than we thought on the pieces. But I think everyone I know that works in the space says the Get Out the Count coalitions should be really ramping up right now if they're going to be effective by the time that it matters in 4 years.
And we can hope there's no global pandemic.
So we can hope, yeah, maybe that part will be easier.
That was, I'm sorry, I'm very
Oh.
passionate. I was like, I'm just thinking because, it's sad, but like our current federal government has the way it's going is trying to suppress votes. And even in Connecticut, it's a blue state, but things trickle eventually down the line. And so what does that mean for this work? And how do like we prepare for stuff like that in the future? Because I don't know, like having, that what was it, a couple of weeks ago that the Supreme Court, shut down one of the rights that we thought were protected, and it just makes it more uncertain that things are really like have faith in the system that we thought was protect us. And so I think there's a lot of pressure, I guess, on the communities to kind of like step in. So yeah, so like what does that mean for this work? I guess that's kind of where I'm sitting at.
That's a good general discussion. I
Yeah.
mean, it could be more motivating, but also I think for immigrant communities, there's some difficult decisions, obviously, about wanting to expose themselves to government.
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe in Connecticut, it's so hard to know whether will Connecticut be a state like Connecticut, like a blue,
Mhm.
pretty solid blue state, be targeted because of their blueness, or will it just be like, we're not going to bother? We're not going to have impact, so we're gonna try to impact voting in places that are more battleground. I think that it seems like that's the thinking that I've heard at least. But in terms of, I mean, on that topic though, these groups are thinking a lot about social media and misinformation. Like there is the misinformation portion that is maybe the most relevant. There is there's probably going to be an election interference. So how do these kind of groups possibly deal with like the Russian government trying to interfere with our election by sowing misinformation? That's kind of maybe where more these groups are focused, thinking that's maybe the more realistic risk to us. But nobody has a good answer even to that. A lot of these folks are there's a lot of close to retired folks, things like that. People that aren't like, it's not the young folks that are in the coalition that are really might have ideas about some of that. So that for us, for these folks is a big question mark.
Okay.
Jeff, have you seen this? I feel like you're operating in a liberal context too.
We are, but I think we've long been a target as one of these, states that the Republican Party has always thought that they could turn. And so that's why I think the local activists are kind of hyper vigilant, and why there are organizations here that are continue to put money into it. We get the same thing with like the census. We get no attention because we're always like first in the nation in census self-response and turnout. And so, maybe nationally we don't get the attention, but I think the local players here kind of, are very afraid and kind of, know what could be coming. So hopefully we continue to, fund and support these efforts.
Great. I will definitely post too on the forum just to see if anybody has other examples from other states that might have other contexts that just weren't able to attend today.
This is great, by the way. That's great that you guys have been working and socializing data in a way that is like digestible for people to understand and know what to do with. So that's awesome.
Any other questions?
I think there were, Sarah, what you were talking about, I mean, just to kind of address what this current conversation is about and what something, Sarah, you mentioned, like really briefly, you mentioned voter captain and relational organizing. And when I think about misinformation, I think about staring at a screen. And when I think about relational organizing, I think about being in person without screens. And I'm curious, I want to learn more about that. I don't know if now is the time for that, but I want to know what is this voter captain? What is that thing that you talked about?
You know, I can connect you with the professor that is working on it. I love the model that he uses. And actually, I was recently at the Funders Collaborative for Civic Participation. There was a conference there, and other people talked about a similar model. And it's exactly that, Clancy. It's just training people how to have conversations about voting, like finding out like from a common area of interest, like you know, you're Vietnamese. Well, in Vietnam, you know, what did people have? What was voting like in Vietnam? And like trying to help people make connections to voting here, whether it's people being from a different country and not actually knowing everything that they feel they need to know in order to vote, or it's just trying to get at those, like, you know, the kind of what we're obviously uncovering during the research that we're doing of people feeling like their vote doesn't matter. So trying to relationally do that from a values perspective. And the coalition itself is actually going to try to expand that model. He's been doing research and it's been pretty successful. And so there are more organizations that are going to be training folks in Hartford. So there is going to be more of this like relational organizing, voter captain kind of work in Hartford, which is really exciting. But I can connect you with the professor because he probably has a paper, presentations and things like that. But I love the model that he uses, so I'm happy to tell people it.
Cool. Thanks. Yeah, it feels like at least somewhat of an antidote to the very real concerns that Jasmine brought up.
And Jeff, in Minneapolis, don't you all have like neighborhood associations that are way more organized than most places that kind of serve that trusted function? Or
Yeah, we do. They're really struggling these days, though. Most of their like city, funding that they get from the city and the state has been cut down to almost nothing. And so they're kind of working on, a lot of them are consolidating and trying to kind of reorganize themselves. So while they do exist and while they do provide some of that function, yeah, it's gonna take a lot more, I think, to keep that going.
Well, I am happy they have you all to support them and hoping that spreading your stories will encourage other NNIP partners to help, especially because the data lift feels pretty light. I mean, not that it's work. I know it's work, but it's in the public domain, not a lot of cleaning. So it feels like hopefully more people will take it up and get some help these groups that are shoestring put some strategy and think more, like you said, Sarah, about working together.
Well, and some NNIP partners there might be organizations that are getting a lot of funding because there are a lot of risks, so
Right.
there are partners that might actually be able to do some pretty robust support also. So, I mean, I guess that would be an encouragement especially if you're in a battleground state or one of these states where voting rights is being curtailed. This is a great way. There are lots of organizations, grassroots organizations that are really doing this work, and some of them are actually getting significant funding So like they need support, like they're not just shoestringing it, and makes it more important for them to make sure they have information to really inform really effectively the dollars that they're really trying to spend in a responsible way.
Well, that's a fantastic way to end. Thank you guys very much for taking the time out to present and get this documented. I will share the recording, and Sarah, if you could send the slides, I'll post those slides too, so folks that wanted to make it but couldn't make this time can also benefit from the work. And Leah, I'm thinking too, we maybe should